feel like. If guys are buying modulars and put them up, they don't have any of the engineering specs with them.
Oh, they should.
Some do.
You want to make sure we got our microphones turned on and our
Don't try to boss us.
cell phones turned off.
1 o'clock,
Or at
can you
least,
get on with this?
at least on
The first day,
on
just prove
stun.
yourself, and then maybe we'll take some.
He's coming out of the gate.
You ready?
So seasoned, even the, our council doesn't show up. Oh, no, Scott's running it.
Okay, I'd like to call the meeting to order. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Mona, can you take roll, please?
Here?
Here.
Here.
I'm here.
Here.
Okay, thank you. Public comment. Any, at this time, members of the public may address the board on any non-agendized item. The public is encouraged to work through staff to place items on the agenda for board consideration. No action can be taken on matters not listed on the agenda. Comments are limited to 3 minutes per person. Any public comment today? Okay, seeing none, we're going to make a switch of our agenda. We have one of our experts in the room today, Mr. Carl Brewstad from, is going to talk about the Jenny Lynn Water System Master Plan. So we're going to jump to new business 4 and do 4C first in the respecting his time and get him on the road and get him in and out of here. So
You don't want to run the consent agenda real quick?
now we're going to do that as soon as we get done with 4C. We'll go to the consent agenda. Sometimes it's not real quick, so we're not knowing where it's going. So Bob's not here, so I guess Carl, you're flying solo today.
I think Bob's here, but he was thinking it was going to be later in the agenda.
Well, let's do the consent agenda and get them out of here.
Okay, should we get Bob?
If he's here, yeah, that'd be good.
All right, thank you. All right,
Go
we'll
ahead and
go
sit down,
back.
Carl.
Sit down, Carl. Sit down, Carl.
At Director Strange's request, we're going to go to the consent agenda. Let's move to item 3.
Move for acceptance? No.
Second.
Okay, we got a motion and a second. Mona, if you take roll.
Yes, Director Underhill?
Here.
Director Thomas?
Oh, yes.
Yes.
President Davidson?
Yes.
Director Strange?
Yes.
And President Trevor?
Yes. Okay, very efficient.
See?
Good idea, Terry. Pay attention to you a little more often.
Don't. Not recommend.
Here he is. Now, we juggled the agenda to get you in and out right off the bat, so you're up if you're ready to go. Bob, I don't know if you want to introduce.
Mr. President, I'm sorry. That was my phenomenal idea to try to move this up to the beginning. Maybe let's let you guys take your time and get set up, and then we can just go ahead and go through the calendar on the agenda is along the lines of what's in here.
Okay.
In that order, and that give them the time to get set up.
All right, well, let's start with, thank you, Dave. We'll start with item 4A, discussion action regarding appointments to board, committees, and election of members to JPAs. All of you have provided myself and Mona your requests for which committees to be on. I've appointed the ones that I have charge of and then made recommendations for the other ones. But, so and it's in your packet in item 4A.
I'll make, we have to do them one by one.
Well, the board committees, the engineering committee, the finance committee, legal affairs committee, and then the 2 ad hoc committees, I think.
Joint powers is what I'm
Yeah.
asking about. That's,
Okay,
that's
so-
only at your discretion.
All right, so those are
I'll
already,
make a motion that we approve the recommended slate of joint power authorities.
I'll second that.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Before we go to public comment, any discussion? Any board members want to discuss any part of of my recommendations?
I would like to know what the cost of service study committee is going to be, the ad hoc?
Oh, it's a different,
That was a committee we decided in our last meeting, towards the end of that 8-hour meeting, there was a recommendation to put together an ad hoc to discuss, and we're going to be having a meeting here in January to discuss the cost of study and give some further direction to Jeff and his crew as they go through that.
Yeah, yes, it is, Mr. President, Director O'Neill, as President Ratterman said, it's an ad hoc committee that's going to last for the remainder of the fiscal year. That's to provide assistance as we move forward in developing recommendations for the full board on the work of the cost of service study and the rate study to follow that. So, as we discovered in the meeting last time, there's still some open issues that we've got to work through, that we really need to spend more time to develop more detailed recommendations to bring back to the board at board meetings. So that would be very helpful, I think, for us to have access to board members for that purpose.
Okay. Fine.
Any further discussion on the dais at the board level? Okay, seeing none, we'll ask for, we had a motion and a second, we'll ask for any public comment on this item. Okay, seeing none, Mona, would you take roll, please, on item 4A?
Director Underhill?
Yes.
Director Thomas?
Yes.
Director Davidson?
yes.
Director Strange?
Yes.
And Director Bradley?
Yes. Okay, if Bob, go ahead.
While we're still on this page here, I'd just like to ask a couple of questions. Ever since I've been observing CCWD affairs, there's always been an executive committee listed. It's the first time I've seen it. Maybe it's been there all the time, but it referred to as an ad hoc committee with a sunset date associated with that. Can you explain why that's done?
Ad hocs are supposed to be created with the purpose of having an end date. It's not supposed to last the entire year. That committee in particular may indeed last the entire year, but because it is an ad hoc, we're just going to set it up for the first half of the year, and then when the fiscal year ends in the end of June, we'll revisit as to the necessity of that committee. That committee will be active with meeting with the Board of Supervisors on a monthly basis, is the one thing that we've got it set up for right now. And there's a couple additional purposes that it will be used for as we get into the year.
I think that's very, very important so that we can foresee that that's going to last all year because the Board of Supervisors is going to be there. So
It most likely will be extended, but because it is an ad hoc, we wanted to have a sunset date on it.
Okay, I'm looking forward to that interaction. Just wondered why we were saying it was going to end on a certain date.
And that's only because it's an ad hoc.
Okay. The other thing that I wanted to ask about is this Calaveras Public Power Agency. I'd like to know more about how that agency works and what they do. So is it okay if I attend those meetings when they occur, occasionally?
Sure, you bet. I mean, it's a public meeting. You can certainly attend those. You bet.
All right, thank you. That's all.
Okay, we already voted on this thing. Okay, so we're moving on to item 4C at this point. Bob and Carl show.
And now it is. Sorry. I heard the boom and I wasn't sure. I'm always great with the button. Again, I'm Bob Goddard here, your senior engineer, and we have a presentation from Carl with EI, and they're the firm that we met before, and they have a lot of our water-related projects as well as studies, and she's here to present draft water master plan to the board for your comment.
Great, thanks, Bob. First, I'd like to thank the district for giving us the opportunity to help you guys with the water master planning effort. Again, my name's Carl Brewstad with Peterson Brewstad. Interestingly, I gave a very similar presentation to the board on the same system, the same water master plan in 2005. So it's great to have an opportunity to come back here again. So today, I'm going to talk to you guys about the draft Jenny Lynn Water Master Plan, what our goals and objectives, what we've discovered, talk to you a little bit about the existing facilities, some of the outcome of our assessment, and ultimately identify the recommended improvements. First of all, the goals and objectives of the master plan. We wanted to, first of all, update the hydraulic model. That's kind of the basis of assessing the distribution system, which will then allow us to identify any system deficiencies and ultimately develop a capital improvement plan. Why do we do this? Because we want to be able to plan for future growth, future infill, and plan for the future. This figure here is the service area. Sorry, the scale is a little small. So the existing service area we have currently, or at the end of 2016, 3,755 existing connections, approximately 9,600 residents, and a majority of the connections are residential connections. A little bit about the existing facilities. You have one water treatment plant with capacity of 6 MGD. The system entails 16 different pressure zones, which adds some complexity when you're assessing and modeling the system. You have 5 water storage tanks, 4 pump stations, and approximately 90 miles of pipe. And to support all these different pressure zones, you have 23 PR pressure reducing stations.
You know, Carl, I think it's really good to spend one extra minute on that, because this really is at the heart of the complexities and challenges of this system, and trying to care for it and plan for where the capital investments need to be. I mean, this is, I guess, kind of a case study for a mountain agency and the challenges that we have with areas of high pressure and trying to regulate that in the 23 PRVs and the 14 pressure zones. So that's really at the heart of a lot of the things that we're dealing with right now on high pressure issues and some of the break issues that we're dealing with too. So that's you know, part of the analysis as we're moving forward with this and looking at the capital side of it.
So for us to assess the system, we first had to kind of look at how we're going to plan for growth, how we're going to plan for demand in the future. So I wanted to talk a little bit about this, how we dealt with the demand, because that's probably the biggest, the area that had the biggest impact for the model update. If you go back to the 2005 Water Master Plan for the Jenny Lind system, the decision by management at the time was to stick with the district standard of 300 gallons per capita day, assuming, and the standard also had 2.5 residents per connection, and came up with 750 gallons per customer day or connection. Historical demands are approximately 237 gallons per capita day, and when we met with management during the current update, the goal and the goal of most water districts nowadays is to align your water master planning efforts with your urban water management planning efforts, which is a state mandate, so the 2015 urban water management plan had a 206 gallons per capita day that we have used and incorporated in this model to project future demand. So as you can see, the impact this has, and again, this graph is to kind of show that the top blue line is where we were in 2005. So we actually took a conservative approach, or the district took a conservative approach and projected a much higher consumption rate, which came up with a build-out demand of 12 MGD for the Jenny Lind area. By just changing that taking it, allowing for conservation and complying with the urban water management planning approach, I think that's purple. The bottom line is what we're currently using, which is 7.8 MGD. So that in itself has made a huge impact on the future build-out conditions for the Jenny Lind system.
Did you take into account because the majority of future parcels that are going to be created are going to be 10,000, under 20,000 square feet, where that's pretty much the minimum in the service area now is 20,000 square feet.
The information that staff gave to Carl and direction that we've given Carl is to follow the urban water management plan in terms of growth and volumes of water that were identified in the urban water management plan. And then we are relying upon the general plan from the county, which I guess is still called draft until the appropriate environmental documents are completed. So and I was going to mention, or I didn't want to interrupt with Carl, but in his modeling effort, we have converted the hydraulic model over to a GIS-based water model, which does flow calculations and pressure calculations by areas or zones that you rate the zone area for, so you can identify what the flow is in that area, which is different from the way the earlier models were done.
So I guess to answer your question, Jeff, so by converting the model to a GIS-based model, we allocate demand based off area. So in your case, if the property area gets smaller, it actually gets allocated a smaller demand. So we develop the demand based off those.
Well, I wonder if it does, because if you've got 5 lots per acre as opposed to 2 lots per acre, is that a lower demand overall? I mean, if you're just talking about the geographical area.
Yeah, I mean, the approach we use is we took the total number of connections and took in the total land use area for the residential areas, and then divided that demand by area. So, and with that approach, you would use the same amount of water with 2 connections in 5 acres as you would with 5 connections in 5 acres.
Okay.
District records identify our customers by address and APN, so that can be imported into the GIS, so our specific customer.
Just
can be
just
cited.
one more comment before I go in. Just trying to go over these, these maps are small. I'm sure we have larger maps, but it seems to be, knowing some of the parcels in the area, they seem to be mislabeled it's hard to determine what's what, but I think that there may be some community center where, residential low density or commercial might exist. So I'd like to actually look at a big map.
Sure, I will get that and put you out to the meeting.
Okay.
And Carl, one quick question. I saw that last slide, you were looking out to like 2030 something. In your report, you mentioned dates of in the 2077 and 2057. How far did you look forward, and what method of growth or was that from the urban water management plan? This is where all that came from as far as what's expected in growth.
So, maybe I could probably answer some of this with this next slide. So,
Okay.
So to kind of explain how we came up with these demand projections and the projected growth and the build-out scenarios, we were relying on both urban water management plan, and that was kind of what we used for the unit demand factors. And then we also relied on and I think it's still the draft Calaveras County General Plan, which had the land use planning maps, which is what we used for our planning effort, and the general plan came up with the growth rate, and it comes in, I think, 5-year increments, and it basically averages
In some
out.
places, yeah.
The county was able to furnish us the general plan in GIS format, so it's already in ArcView format, so that was directly imported into their model. As for the growth rates, We followed the growth rates that are in the urban water management plan, which were identified by the state of California, county by county. They show very, very low growth rate in the county. And I fully understand, and I dealt with this dilemma when we were dealing with Kevin, that we have a large number of developments identified in this area, especially around La Cantena area, that are inconsistent with the values that the state is dictated or directed planning efforts to be
So,
done.
but they provided Carl's firm with the draft general plan.
The draft plan, which is the one that the board is, the plan from 2016, which I believe is the current plan as it has been identified, as we understand it.
So we took the growth rates from those documents and used those to project the growth. And the growth rate on that, what we came up with was 0.26% annually, which compounding that year after year is how we came up with. So we took the land use types from the general plan and densities from the general plan and came up with the build-out population, which is 15,745. There were some minor changes from the 2005. I think we cross-referenced from the 2005 general or water master plan, and it was 15,800 and something. So it's pretty consistent with what was done in 2005 for the build-out population. It's the timing that changed. The growth rates that were used in 2005 were significantly higher. And that's something that, this is a draft document if we find it appropriate to look at increasing that, but that was what we got from the coordinating with the general plan.
The one thing I wonder is if we should also maybe look at the Department of Finance's growth projections, those numbers, because I know in some.
Those are the ones that we ultimately are relying on, and they do 5-year allotments. They just
Oh, so
have growth
that
numbers.
is consistent with what we've.
They're showing a growth rate in the county of about 2.5% every 5 years, which you just back the math out. It's now less than 0.5% a year.
Okay. I just know we considered that in other planning efforts as one of the, because we kind of try to bookend it and give a range of projections.
And a higher growth rate will not affect the build-out number. It'll only affect the timeline that we would have to ultimately look at. This being a 10-year document, as long as we're reasonably accurate in the next 10 to 20-year window, it should be a fairly valid. The conclusions and recommendations are valid.
I mean, it doesn't really matter, because we don't do it based on, we're not gonna do it on a time frame. We're gonna do it based on a need.
Yes,
So,
but the ultimate hope is that we would identify anything that's needed in the next 10 years so that it could be incorporated into the budgeting that the district does in that time span before the next draft of this report is documented. Drafted.
I mean, that's the big guess that we make in the beginning, but after that begins, then it's all based upon how many connections we get and then staying ahead of the growth, based on capacity being used as opposed to, a state report. We're gonna draft a plan that is gonna be ESFU driven, not Dave driven.
Correct. And so, just to add to that, so what the draft master plan right now has in there is when we get to 90% capacity, say the water treatment plant, that's what we say is the trigger. So whether it takes you 20 years or it takes you 3 years, when you get to that trigger, which is based on the number of connections that we also identify, that's when we're recommending that you start planning for an expansion, you start planning for additional capacity.
I have a question, Carl. I'm
Okay.
trying to keep pace with all these assumptions that you're basing your report on. And I'm going back to the slide where you talk about the average daily demand approaches. If you have the planning standards at 300 GPCD and the historic water consumption has been 237, why did you reduce it to 206? I'm just curious about that.
Correct. And part of the urban water management planning requirements is the state's mandating or encouraging all districts to reduce their consumption by 20% by 2020.
Okay.
And so that was kind of the whole urban water management planning effort.
Yeah, and that's not really something that's discretionary because that was part of the 2009 state legislative package. So if we don't make that, then it potentially exposes our water rights to risk of challenge.
Okay.
And it reflects, and honestly, it reflects where we're at. I mean, we've reduced we're ahead of the schedule to get to 20 by 2020 anyway.
And it would affect grant and loan
Exactly, that's a good point, yeah.
Okay, another thing that kind of jumped off the page as I looked through this, on page 15 of the staff report here, excuse me, I'm kind of losing my voice here, but the percentage losses are listed at 2015 at 35%. And that's explaining percentage losses. I'm assuming it's leakage in the system and
Correct. It's basically you take your plant production and deduct the consumption from your meters.
Okay. I'm having trouble with why there isn't an attempt, at least mathematically, to reduce that leakage on the future build-out. I mean, if you're going to be improving facilities, don't you build it with a higher efficiency of installation so that you minimize leakage? It just seems sort of an opportunity that you could mathematically assume that we're going to be saving water. The 35% or 35% of your water production being filtered into the groundwater just is an astronomical figure to me. I don't know, does everybody else see that as odd or nobody?
Well, loss is a significant issue with the leaks, the pressure, regulating valves that are leaking in other areas. So, and it's kind of like a dog chasing its tail. Until those infrastructure improvements are made, I would expect leakage or losses to stay similar to where they are, assuming that those marijuana people aren't stealing it.
I think, Russ, you have a good point, though. By 2040, wouldn't it be assumed that some of those capital improvement projects would have been completed or could it be assumed that leakage would go from 35 to maybe 25 or 29, maybe?
That's the same thing they said back in the 80s.
So, I guess to address the water loss, what inherent with urban water management planning effort, part of that achieving your 20% reduction includes trying to improve or reduce your water loss. So one of the elements that we've identified at the capital replacement program is the pipeline replacement plan, and in no better term than to just kind of identify a sustainable approach, we came with a 1% a year replacement, and you identify your worst pipeline segments up front and prioritize those, and hopefully those will be your leaky pipes, or where most of your water loss is going to be with old faulty pipe. And so as you replace your pipe through that program, you're going to be minimizing your water loss, hopefully.
Well, the new development will, be held to a higher standard than the majority of our infrastructure, and there'll be less pipelines in the ground because it's higher density property. So, this is just a, conservative approach. I agree, it would have made sense to have it slightly ticked down, but, it's just it certainly stands to reason that we're going to hold, new development to a higher standard than they did back in '67 with Boise Cascade, so.
Well, that's what sort of caught my eye, is that this goes out for many, many years, and hopefully we would demand that the pipes be done with more efficiency and better installations. That's, anyway, I don't want to beat it to death, but it just seems like it should be adjusted.
Director Thomas, we could certainly look at changing the numbers, say, between the existing population as a gross number and the build-out population as the growth value, and use a lower loss cost percentage for that additional, wow, someone called that number? No. Look at a lower value for that loss for new infrastructure. Of course, if we don't replace our existing infrastructure or in that time frame, it'll just worsen, so maybe that'll offset.
That's possible, too.
Yeah, it's a great point, though. I'm glad you mentioned it, Director Thomas, because it's with the new requirements on water use efficiency, we have to do audits of our system and do reporting on this on an annual basis. So that's evolving at the same time that it's becoming more and more important, at least to the state, and what we're required to do. So I think that the challenge will be as the rest of the system gets older, we have more and more challenges there, but then as we put in new infrastructure, that gives us the reduced loss associated with it. So, I mean, I think it certainly would hope that our percentages would go down. I mean, that's the goal is to address this. So we'll go back and take a look at it. I think that's a really good point.
Okay, other districts that you work with, is it 35% consistent throughout the state, or is there any such thing?
We just did the City of Folsom's Water Master Plan, and they were like 33% water loss. And again, I think the water loss also takes account flushing, operational needs of keeping the
Fire
water
services
fresh.
don't pay.
Sure.
So it's not purely just leaks in the system. I mean, there's other losses in there as well.
All right, thanks.
So when we started assessing the existing system, we basically assessed it compared to the district's design standards. So for water treatment plant, they're sized to meet existing and future max daily demand is what you want your size your plant for. Storage is a combination of operational, emergency, and fire flow requirements. Pump stations are sized with the largest pump out of service, as identified as the firm capacity. And then for the system piping, PHD is peak hour demand. We want to keep the velocity in the pipes less than 5 feet per second. For max day demand plus fire flow conditions, we want to keep it under 10 feet per second. And then we have low and high pressure standards. So low pressure, we want to keep the pressure above 40 psi. And for high pressure, target to keep it below 120. So like I said, the first thing we did in assessing the system was we updated the hydraulic model. We incorporated all the new connections into the existing model through 2016. We incorporated the 2015 baseline demands from the Urban Water Management Plan. That was for our existing system. So we basically, when we updated the hydraulic model, we have two different models that we run. We have the existing system, which is your current situation, and then we have the build-out model scenario. And the primary goal of the existing model is to assess the existing system, see if there's any deficiencies. And if there are, then we rely on the build-out model. If we're going to replace a pipe that's deficient today, we want to make sure it's sized to meet the build-out conditions. And so ultimately what the build-out models developed is to determine future pipe sizes, future infrastructure requirements at the build-out scenario. And so if you have to replace a pipe today, you would want to, if it's going to be a 6-inch needed now, in the build-out scenario, it needs to be an 8-inch, we would want to make sure you put an 8-inch in today. So in the existing system assessment, the general assessment is comparing a lot of the facilities to the district design standards. In doing that, the water treatment plant, comparing it to its capacity to the max daily demand, similar to the pump stations and storage tanks. All those in their current situation meet the design criteria. The model was utilized to assess the distribution system, all the piping between the treatment plant tanks and customers. And there were some deficiencies identified, and we'll talk about that a little more. We had some low pressure areas, some high pressure areas. We had some high velocities in the pipes, and there were some deficient fire flows that didn't meet the current standards. First, this figure tries to capture the low pressure areas. These are areas that fall below 40 psi. Because of the mountainous area, you have a lot of topography changes across your system, and a lot of these areas are primarily just a result of being close to the storage tanks, and there's not a lot the district can do. There are some areas that are a result of pipes being undersized, where the velocities in the pipe are too high, creating head loss, and those are areas that we will identify as needing improvement, and they'll be in the capital improvement plan.
Carl, I've got a question, and that is, in those areas then of low pressure, have we assessed whether the location of the tank could be improved? I.e. maybe the tank being moved to a higher elevation, or in the original design of the system, it's in the very best place it could be?
In our assessment, we were primarily looking at just a lot of these low areas are adjacent to the tank, and most of the red areas adjacent to tanks are actually served by the upper pressure zone. So you'll have some areas where you have dual piping. And so even though it shows it's a low pressure, the customers in that area are getting a higher pressure. And so we have to look at each one individually, and we've been able to basically take some of these and say they're really not an issue, and focus on the ones that are issues. And I think primarily that northwest corner, there are some areas there where there are some smaller pipelines, and then in a future slide, we'll talk about some of the higher velocities. And by upsizing those pipes, we can eliminate some of the lower pressure areas.
Okay, thanks.
And now, one of, I guess, the biggest concerns in this area is the higher pressure areas. And again, because of the topography changes, some of these areas are going to be difficult to address. This is in a static situation, so we basically have no demand to the system. This is just the worst case on a high pressure side is a static scenario. So these are the areas where the pressure is going to exceed 120 psi. Some of the possible solutions would be to add additional PRVs, create additional pressure zones. And I think this has been considered in the past. Right now, I think most of these areas have individual PRVs on the customers' services, and I think that's our recommendation. Is there were some additional PRVs identified in the past that have been incorporated, and there's no additional identified in this report.
I'm curious as to what the altitude is at these locations?
The elevations?
The elevation, yeah.
I mean, it varies obviously significantly across the system because you have 14 different pressure zones. Off the top of my head, I don't know the elevation.
It seems like there's a slide.
The lower elevations are around low 400s, the higher elevations
700.
around mid 700s.
Oh, okay, so it's pretty low.
About 350 feet elevation change over the entire.
I think there's a slide, there's a slide in here someplace on it.
Carl, what was the kind of the thought process behind why there would no recommended additional PRVs at this time, and instead staying with the PRV at the actual service connection?
There was a study done in 2015 that we helped the district look at the high pressure areas, and at that time we identified I think, seven new PRVs. I think 4 or 5 of those have been installed. 3 are currently in the works of being installed. So the purpose of this master plan, we assumed they were all installed. So that's why they're not. I mean, we've previously recommended PRVs to minimize the pressures where we could. A lot of these areas, if you're familiar with the area, there's some significant topography changes where you have a ridge line and you have a looped main that goes down and comes back. So it's really difficult to add PRVs to that kind of a system.
And is that, in some cases, looking at where it would reduce pressure to a level where, because of topography, maybe a return like that or an incline, that it would require additional pumping to be able to, if you reduce the pressure below this level, then you may be creating other infrastructure requirements to be able to deliver to those farther down the line. That's kind of what I've heard is kind of the balance that we're looking at, is where we can put PRVs in the main lines and where it simply doesn't make sense, because, you know, conceivably you can have PRVs on every line and to keep everything, to try to address every area of higher pressure, but at some point you're going to be affecting service to others downstream that causes problems and cost to construct.
Correct, and like you said, our limiting criteria with these is if we put a lot of areas where if we put a PRV, the homes on the ridge would be below the 40 psi, and the homes at the bottom would be above 120. So we're setting them to keep the homes on top at above 40, and then add in the individual PRVs down on the lower elevation areas.
It also adds complexity to your distributions crews' daily job assignments as we subdivide this area into more and more pressure zones. There's more equipment for them to have to maintain and verify that the settings are correct.
So I think to further answer that question, I mean, we did, in that prior effort, we went out with operations staff. We actually did fire hydrant tests. We had pressure monitors on different hydrants. And so we went through a pretty detailed process just looking at these high pressure areas. And I think we had a pretty thorough assessment back then and kind of optimized what we could with PRVs. You know, with those high pressure mains, I mean, it increases your potential for leak, is obviously the downfall of that.
Carl, would there be any benefit in going back and retesting some of those areas again at this point, or is it still, you think that information that we collected at that time is still reliable to use in our planning going forward?
I think the information still reliable, since there hasn't been a whole lot of change to the system.
You said 2015, right?
Yeah. I don't know.
Yeah, no, that's actually, okay, that's more recent than I recall. Okay.
Yeah, if there's been any significant changes, it might be worthwhile to go back now that they've put some of the PRVs in to see what those, you know, did they actually come out as we hoped?
So you said there was 7 recommended in 2015, and do we have enough information in the room to know how many of those are done and how many are yet to be done in the near future?
Well, Charles can of course speak to this, but I believe there are 3 being installed currently that we have a contractor on selected, and that would be the ones that were identified in the 2015 report as number 6, 7, and 8. And everything I understand is 1 through 5 have already been done.
Okay.
Though I have not physically dug them up and figured out.
Okay, no, thank you.
I've been told.
Good to see the 2015 work has been completed before we get into the 2018 work here, or 19.
Yeah.
So the other area that we looked at were the high velocity in the pipes. So the red pipes are the ones that did not meet the design criteria of being less than 5 feet per second. The areas on the north are primarily the pipes leaving the water treatment plant and going to tank A. And I think the key project identified for those that would alleviate those is the proposed AB transmission main. I think it's already on the budget, but it's in the CIP. The other red lines in the southern part of the system are more distribution lines, and those are prioritized lower, but they all are also on the CIP list. So for the capital improvement plan, in general, like I said before, we took a more holistic approach to it, and what we're seeing most of our clients looking at is a sustainability approach. So if I take the life cycle of my assets and divide the value of my assets by that life cycle, that's how much I should be spending on an annual basis to keep up. So on pipelines, we typically use a 100-year life cycle. Sustainable approach would be to replace 1% of your pipe annually. With 90 miles of pipe, that's about 0.9 miles per year. And so we've taken that as our baseline budget for the CIP on an annual basis. And then we've identified the pipes, segments of pipes from our hydraulic modeling, and then we'll basically, or the district will pick those priority projects on an annual basis, and that is how we're filling the CIP. Similarly, for water treatment, storage, pump stations, we didn't identify any immediate needs based off the design criteria, but again, using that same approach, water treatment plants have a life cycle, storage tanks have a life cycle, pump stations. So we've taken the value of those assets, divided it by the life cycle, and plan to put that budget on an annual basis into the CIP as well. More for a planning purpose, so if you don't need to expand your treatment plant or rehab it for 10 years, you should be budgeting money annually, so when that comes in 10 years, you have money to do that rehab.
On page 45 of your implementation scheduled, Carl, the Phase 1 high-velocity improvements is scheduled for 2019, 2023. Are any of those high-velocity improvements that are identified there, are any of those in our current CIP program?
Correct. I
Are
think
they all are?
well,
I think only the AB transmission line is. I believe that's the only one that's been a project identified before even 2015.
And so the 1.6 million for the AV transmission main to get it, how long is that? Do you know, Bob? What linear distance are we talking about?
I think it's around 20, 25,000.
I'll go with that answer.
yeah. Well, that's not, I think, well, for 1.6 million, I think that assumed it was like a mile.
Because
I thought it was all the way from the
it is.
maybe not the full rate.
We can get you that information.
No, that's okay. I was just kind of curious. It's less than the recommended annual cost of, sort of, you know, the bullet point just above that, annual cost $2 million a year.
And again, I think that's
1% or basically 0.9 miles out.
So I think our approach on a budgeting approach, our recommendation would be to spend district should be spending $2 million a year just on pipeline replacements to be sustainable.
Just for this service area?
For this one
Yeah,
service
I mean,
area.
that gives you the magnitude of the assets that we have in the ground and the enormity of caring for them.
And so my question with that is, and anyone can answer that, is what that represents what, about 25% of our water clients? Or as far as the number was, it 3,700? Forget where that was. And what does that represent then as far as all of our water, the 3,755 existing connections? What percentage of that for our entire districts?
If I'm correct, in Charles, that's our second largest. The Hunters Plant, Arnold area is actually our largest service area on the water side. It's larger than copper, and so it's the number 2. I have to get you those numbers. I don't know. Is a breakdown? Quarter.
Yeah, because we got 12,000 some, about almost 13. So yeah, that's where I figured about 23, 24%.
The majority of our customers are going to get this passing.
Okay. Well, they just got a 3A.
The AV transmission line, though, I have to say, this is a project that we certainly have been, has been in our plans, and we evaluate this one every year, but because of other priorities within water, this hasn't, and I frankly don't even know where this project is within the 5-year CIP, or if it even is in that, within those 5 years as of the plan that's adopted today. It's become clear to me as we've had more focus on this service area and dealing with the challenges there, that this AV line needs to move up in priority within the plan, and we need to make progress on this. But again, it just kind of shows you, this is one of those, is my recollection, this is one of those significant, important projects that's in kind of the parking lot with all the other projects beyond the 5-year horizon of our adopted CIP right now. So, yeah, Charles, you want to go ahead?
Yeah, the part of it was actually, we want to get through this entire round of master plans for Lockington, Copper Cove, Jenny Lynn, and the Copper Cove sewer. And then that would lead into the next planning cycle for the CIP. So some of these projects weren't heavily weighed upon in the last round because I needed these master plans for coming up. But I wanted to have the best plan possible that, you know, has some actual significant amount of time and energy committed.
Yeah, and the challenge is going to be those other projects that are the priority projects today in the plan will remain high priority projects, and now we've got additional ones that we know we have to make progress on as we get through these master plans. So you can see the demands upon our capital program are growing, not diminishing.
I have a question. Population always is important to me, and this really doesn't, there's not a lot of growth down there right now, and there doesn't look to be a lot of growth, because we're seeing existing 9,500 customers or connections, or, excuse me, the population, and we're only going to have 15,000 in our build-out year?
Correct. And that's based off your service area boundaries and the densities from the general plan.
And so no, not a lot of growth.
6,000 people.
Yeah, that's,
Well, Director Underhill, on the water master plan, I struggled quite a bit on this plan as well. There are a large number of developments that would infill this area into that build-out number, but I don't know if they're real, but I'm also being guided by both the general plan and the growth numbers that are provided to me by the state of California, which are for the county. They do not identify any area. So it's not unreasonable to say that that growth number could be higher, because I honestly don't think that the county will see much growth other than maybe around Angels Camp, Murphy's, Copperopolis, Copper Cove, Valley Springs. Those are probably the only communities that will get growth. Everywhere else, those population numbers will stay or maybe even drop.
The thing about
That's a
Valley
hard thing to
Springs,
sort of-
it's the only area of the county that has infrastructure in place to accommodate growth right now.
Yes.
Any significant infrastructure.
Yes.
And that includes the sewer side.
yeah.
You know, there's 1,000 acres that's in AD 604 that's probably 15% developed, but, you know, they all have access to, or most of them, or a majority of the acreage has access to sewer and water. So it's a logical place to grow, but it just, you know, it just happens in spikes, you know. It's not going to be sustainable. It goes with the real estate cycle and the boom and bust, and overall, you know, it's just not very much, you know.
So our demand projection is not a whole heck of a lot. Okay.
Well, but it's significant to know too, that, you know, we actually have the water supply. I think, you know,
Yeah, oh,
if you look at the fact of, you know, if I was a developer in the area, I mean, I would be happy to.
That's kind of a stretch.
Yeah, I've been called many things. But, I mean, I would look to an area that actually has, you know, the ability to serve the future, you know, with the water supply that they have. Not a lot of areas in the state that can actually say they've got water supply to continue to grow.
No, that's a good point. I mean, I
can
think
get a
there's
golf
lot of
course.
folks in this county that don't want those little pocketed developments way out in the middle of wherever.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think in closing, the, you know, the assessment of the system, I mean, the great thing is your current facilities, your treatment plant, your storage tanks, your pump stations are adequately sized, so that's good. You don't have really any immediate improvements that are significant. It's more your sustainability approach with replacing facilities as they age, and the pipelines. I mean, the pipelines are what we see as the only immediate deficiencies with the system.
So Carl, is that the standard now, to expect these pipelines to have a 100-year lifetime? I mean, that to me sounds like it's longer than the normal 40 or 50 that I'd heard about, but maybe with the greater technology that we have now, that's standard.
The standard life cycle now for pipes is 100 years, and it's assuming you're using standard construction.
Modern standards?
And I think a lot of a lot of these systems, and it's not just your district, it's others, when a lot of these pipes were put in 50 years ago, they put them in native soils, they could have been corrosive. So modern, more modern construction, you're going to have bedding material, you're going to put, if you're going to test the soil, if it's corrosive, you'd put, make sure you had provisions in there to protect the pipe, or use plastic pipe instead of steel or ductile. So I think in general, the life cycles we see are 100 years for pipe, and I mean, there's proof that pipe can last much longer than that as well.
Hidden in all of that is the fact that on the distribution lines, which are the lines that our customers pull from rather than transmission lines, we have surface laterals for every connection, and that can often be the biggest problem, not the actual line condition or leaks in the line, it's the surface lateral going to our customer, because the customer will point out that there's a leak, or will realize a leak after his meter, but before the meter, we have no way of knowing if there's losses happening there. I mean, if it's just a gallon a day or a few gallons a day per connection, that's enough to be a very large value over time.
Could one of you or both of you point out the physical location of this AB transmission main, the 16-inch main line? I'm looking at these different presentations, and I see some existing 16-inch lines, but where is this on the map?
And Charles, you may be able to help me, but I think it's the red line that goes north to south. That's between the A and B tank.
So A tank is down off of Silver Rapids near Highway 26 near Silver Rapids, and then the A tank is to the north. Northwest of that.
Well, there's a tank up on Usher, right?
It's the tank up
On Usher?
on top.
Or they're on Vista del Lago?
No, it's not on this. No. It's to the north.
To me, it's in the appendix.
So the water treatment plant is on the east side of that red line that goes east-west, where you see the Calaveras River coming out of the New Hogan Reservoir. This,
You know what, we'll create a figure for all board members, and we'll distribute that.
Okay.
In addition to whatever.
And this is really good preview. We're going to come back with a CIP plan update, and I'm sure we're going to be kicking those discussions off probably in a month. And this will be one of the projects that we will discuss with, I believe that'll begin with the engineering committee, which Director Thomas, I think you were just appointed to the engineering committee, so we'll definitely be going through this project in detail in the very near future.
Very good.
We'll address this before we come back with you with the draft final draft.
We're going to find out where AB really is then.
Only one zone.
The inherent problem with using a computer-generated hydraulic model is the output information tends to be hard to interpret when it's rows or columns and columns of numbers with values. And then you don't have a key map that's large enough, it's hard to do. And then if you have the computer, it's not a problem because you would just type the value in and it would go to the right location.
Right.
Well, it's kind of makes my head spin here where I'm looking at a delivery of like 0.04, no, that's PSI. But there was another place where I was looking where out of the diameter of the pipe is a 12-inch diameter pipe, and the flow in feet per second is 0.26. I just can't understand how you could have that small of a flow out of a 12-inch line. It's a very long line. Is there that much?
Is that velocity, or is that the velocity in the pipe, or is that the actual
Velocity.
gallons per minute? Velocity could be down to quarter.
Yeah, was that one that was, obviously wasn't recommended for improvement to?
Well, I tried to look through the maps here to find this particular 2,457 feet of pipeline that's identified as J5010. I don't know, I just, in the length of time that I had to kind of pour through this, I couldn't really identify where that pipe was.
Correct. So like Bob said, one of the difficulties when we run the model has pipes identified by numbers. And so when we find deficiencies, we try, like if you look in the CIP where we listed the pipes, we tried to provide a description, say, between this street and this street on Y Street or whatever. So but again, we're looking at a computer screen and it's got just pipe numbers.
The
So we have
other,
to cross-reference them.
step in modeling, what they did is they created a number of different scenarios: average day, fire flow conditions in different locations. The model you may, or the data you might get presented is the data under one scenario where we have such a high demand in a location that essentially it starves the rest of the service areas. And you get some weird, quirky number scenarios that aren't necessarily representative of what would normally happen, but are valid conditions because they are a scenario that we considered. That's an accurate statement.
Did I hear you say weird and quirky?
No,
that whole area down
for
there.
example, if the district is interconnected, if the district's interconnected and we have a high demand in one zone, it starves the other zones. In fact, that is part of the problem, and some of the improvements are designed to correct a situation where where we have a high demand or a low pressure situation in one zone that then starves the other zones. It's a whack-a-mole kind of approach where when you're doing the modeling, you have to do different scenarios and try to make improvements that work for every single alternative that you're analyzing.
But if
Do you understand all this?
Of course.
If you have any comments, we can look into it. I mean, we'll look into that.
Well,
Good answer.
We can drag the model out, we can bring it over to Brennan, or.
Yeah, I mean, we can
Go back to the engineering committee. if you
He'll
want.
get back to
I
you.
wanna-
He'll get back to you.
So we'll welcome any comments and we'll look at them and get you some answers. Right now, I without the model in front of me, I don't know where that.
Hey, stay in your own district.
Well, when I heard him say weird and quirky, I knew that it was down in Jeff's district.
Okay, well, is anything further to present on this?
That concludes it.
Okay.
No, I think is listed in your agenda packet. We have it currently posted as of last week on our district website. And we're going to collect any comments that we receive from the public, though I don't believe that they would have many material comments related to this report. And then I would come back to you in 4 or 5 weeks, which would be 3 or 4 board meetings with the plan that we would hope to adopt.
Okay.
My only recommendation is that, you know, in actually looking at some of the maps, you know, it's clear to me that some of the commercial property that exists in the area is identified as low-density residential and some industrial property as well, in the area of Hogan Dam and 26.
Okay.
And so I would just look to make sure that that's all, because that's, and much of that area is part of 8604. So just be aware of that.
Closer towards Jenny Lynn, the community, or down towards?
No, Hogan Dam and 26, so
Okay.
like in the Gold Creek,
Gold Creek.
you know, between Gold Creek and Valley Springs and the gym.
And the public has 21 days to get back to you?
Well, I'm aware that it was impressed upon me that we'd like to get more progress made on these master plans. I will be coming back to you in the next board meeting with the wastewater master plan for Copper Cove. We'd likely follow that up with the water one with Copper Cove, the draft, and then I would hope to come back the following meeting with this draft final. So that's how I came to the 21 days, as I backed that date out.
Okay,
So have we done the math in regards to infrastructure needed for expansion and future connections?
Well, that's what my point was, yeah.
For build out. In terms of the areas that are currently vacant, that are in our service area for the water side,
No, I'm just talking about, there's future demand, you know, we have a capacity fee, capacity fees pay for the future demand. Have we done the math to determine what or have an estimate of what, you know, it's a total number divided by new capacity.
we were talking about that very issue before we came into this meeting. While that is not specifically a task that's part of this master plan, in other words, what would the cost of, not the cost of service, but rather the impact fees be for new connections? Our belief would be, since the flow values are going down, or the infrastructure required from our previous plans, that would impact those fees downward. Though there would have to be an analysis done after the master plan.
I think this is
I can
just
do it
like.
real
this-
quick here on my
yeah.
cell phone if you.
No, I
give me
think
the
this
two
is,
numbers.
no, this is like the law contended. This is the first step. We can identify what the requirements are, you know, out to build out. We try to phase those in a way that's most cost effective, and we don't build them until we really need them. And then we can develop the capital projects in more detail and the costs associated with that and the realistic timeline for them. And then that can then be passed through both to R&R on the replacement side, and then in expansion and affecting new connection, the fee for connection. So that's one of the real positive things we can do out of this, is really make sure that our numbers are updated to reflect our current thinking on what the requirements are going to be, and hopefully that can change it in a positive way, or deductive way, for the fees that we charge. But that's something we'll continue with as we move forward in the next, through this year on this.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Carl. Thank you, Bob. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
I just want to say too, Carl has done really important work for us. He's also our design engineer on the pretreatment improvements at the Jenny Lynn plant to deal with the effects of the Butte fire and our FEMA-funded project. So really appreciate all your great work, Carl, and your firm. Really do appreciate it.
Have you been down there fly fishing? On the Calaveras?
Yeah.
You do know about it, right? Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
All right, thank you, Carl. Thank you, Bob. Appreciate it. Okay, we're moving on to item,
You got me frightened there. You're using the old spay rod, are you?
Item 4B, discussion, action regarding acceptance and final completion of the Ebbets Pass Reach 3A Water Transmission Line Replacement Project. CCWD CIP project number 11078. Charles Palmer, please, thanks.
I'm going to try to make this very short. So this is just the completion and acceptance of the Reach 3A project. As you know, that it was constructed by TNS Construction out of Sacramento. They replaced or have completed replacement of 19,360 feet of the 12-inch water main, replaced 13 pressure regulating stations, and that was as of December 31st, the project, last year, at New Year's there, they had reached final completion, so at this point, we're ready for final completion acceptance, and that's the final budget numbers. If the board has any questions.
Yeah, I just want to note, I'm sorry, Director Underhill, did you?
Oh, no, go ahead.
I just want to note that this is not going to be possible in every project to deliver a final cost that is so close to the original bid amount, but this can't happen without terrific engineering, terrific project management or inspections, our operations staff and their assistance on this project to do what happened. I mean, such a complex project and such a challenging environment to do this in. I mean, we talk about the pressure zones, we just talked about that. I mean, all of those issues in play, plus through the business centers, through the residential areas. And the net effect is the only, the change order, we had the $50,000 change order to deal with the effects of the storm event, which created the emergency work with the exposed water line, and that was, we utilized them because they were under contract. They were able to do this in the most effective, efficient way. But I mean, you look at that beyond it, it's actually the net, excluding that, would be a deductive. The total change orders were actually a deductive amount from a reduction from the original amount. So that's extraordinary. I mean, change orders, less than 5% are excellent. I mean, to do it at this level, I'm really can't thank our staff enough for making this happen. And this was many long hours of you cleaning up all of the documents that it took to get to this point. So I can't thank you enough.
Excuse me, what is the standard for a change order? You were going to look that up to see if you could find anything?
And Charles, maybe you have a better sense of this. It wasn't readily available a number as far as what is the industry standard on an acceptable level of change order. I mean, I know contingencies commonly can be 10% budgeted for this kind of thing. And under 5% from what I can gather from looking at the experience of other
What do we budget
agencies.
for contingencies? Because that's basically what it is,
Yeah.
right?
It was 15%, yeah.
Yeah.
But, I mean, I do have to give a lot of credit to TNS and their superintendent and just our working relationship with them and working through, this problem by far had issues. Don't think that number, that it was not simple, and just having a contractor that's willing to work with you and that's able to offer solutions and, so there were actually a lot of changes, but there were a lot of deductions too. So that's just the kind of the net balance of them, so.
Well, going into this project, when you looked at the initial amount and you thought to yourself, wow, this is going to take forever, we're going to be experiencing me. Remember when we used to go through the change order problems years ago? I mean,
Oh, yeah.
It was astronomical.
No,
It was astronomical.
yeah, oftentimes they shut projects down for a while over just the argument. Are you going to pay us or not? If not, we're not, blah, 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 blah. And so it's really nice to,
No, and I congratulate Charles and his team and TNS for, doing it so smoothly. And yes, you had problems. Oh, I didn't hear about them, and I didn't really see them because, of course, driving
Everybody
right
pulled
through-
together, yeah.
Right
Yeah.
through Arnold, there was no problem at all. It was clean. TNS, of course, should be taken into our, contractor file or whatever, because they did excellent job. There was not any big to do, and so we did it and saved a lot of money, and I'm perfectly willing to
Make a
Make a
motion?
motion?
There you go.
That's what I'm
There you
gonna
go.
do.
That's what we're looking for.
To adopt the resolution accepting the completion of the Reach 3A transmission line.
I'll second that.
I
Okay, we
think, in addition to that, I think we should give them $5.5 million.
Of which we've already given up most of it, it looks like.
Well, the one thing I want to say is it seems in the beginning of this that, and it probably led to, the success of these numbers, but, the walkthroughs and all the pre-meetings and the effort that you guys made on that was really probably what made this number come in as well as it did. And I think that's an example we should take forward, to really take a little more time on the front side to make sure everybody understands the project, both them and us, because, generally you get with somebody that knows what they're talking about, and you can, bounce ideas while you're walking through the project and then get to a more accurate understanding of what each other wants from the other. So that's what I hope we move forward
Okay.
with.
Jeff, so you're saying 3A should be our model?
Yes,
Right.
but I will tell you, I am glad not to have it on our agenda.
Amen. Russ.
Before we do the voting on the discussion, when were we up there for that rah-rah meeting about the completion of the thing?
What do you mean,
I think that was in October 18th, I think, or 20th, or somewhere in there.
meeting.
But that was a wonderful event, and it was to commemorate the completion of the project. Why are we here in January filing a notice of completion? It's hard for me to
That,
take
that
off my
was
contract.
what I call substantial completion, which, that's the actual term used in the
Well,
construction
I
industry.
know.
And that means that the facility was functional and operational at that point, but there were loose ends to still tie up,
Well,
We
much-
had,
That was to celebrate it going into operation, but this is truly the final closeout, and
And that's when we could get TNS there. See,
we
that's
promise we won't have a final completion in a few months or anything else for you.
And the weather was much better back in October to be up there anyway, than waiting for Januanuary.
If we're bragging on TNS so much, then why are we making them wait for over $250,000? That's.
Yeah, because and that's just to complete all of the final punch list items and to get through everything that you have to come up with your final contract amount, all the deductive and the additive items on that, and to reach agreement and get all the paperwork done, which is no small amount of work to do that, to satisfy USDA, who has to be approving all of this
That
stuff.
was only
No,
July.
I hear you. And true, even if we had all of that done immediately, we'd still have to wait under the law to make sure that retainage is to protect others who are working on this project, the subs, and make sure they get paid. So there's certain requirements like that.
I would also, if there's some, I'd like to also compliment staff and the contractors on this. My experience doing a lot of construction monitoring is that the contractors appear to be, this is my perspective, in the back room trying to, fabricate as many change orders as possible, because that provides them the real profit margins that their low bids may not have done necessarily. And so this is just a reflection of what a truly great job you guys have done. And so,
yeah,
Good job.
since we're giving out congratulations to folks that deserve it, also, not enough can be said about our field staff up in Ebbets Pass and Jared and Doug, the construction inspectors, and Teresa and Jesse, and coordinating those.
Kelly is, yeah.
Those personnel. So that was a tremendous help to the project, and, it was really a community effort. So.
Absolutely. And you enjoyed the party.
I did, yeah.
The pomp and circumstance was fun as well.
I just wish we could have paid them faster.
Okay, we got a motion and a second on this. Any public comment? Okay, seeing none, Mona, you take roll?
Director Underhill?
Yes.
Director Thomas?
Yes.
Director Davidson?
Yes.
Director Strange?
yes.
And Director Redmond?
Yes.
Great.
Thank you, Charles.
Thank you.
Okay, now we're moving to item 4D, Peter Martin is going to be presenting the discussion action on the Eastern San Joaquin Groundwater Authority, JPA, Groundwater Sustainability Plan Development and Potential Cost Share.
Mouthful.
All right. Good afternoon, President Ratterman, board members. This is sort of a formality to get things going on the kind of kickoff of the groundwater sustainability plan, which is actually coming up pretty shortly. So we'll move into the next phase with that and probably providing you a lot of updates over the next couple of years. It's a 2-year project. So just to kind of go over what the groundwater sustainability plan is, which is, as you know, is being taken up by the new JPA down in the valley. Well, and includes us as well. So, and that is made up of the 17 members of the GSAs. The Sustainable Groundwater Management Act 2014 required a groundwater sustainability plan to be completed by January 1st of 2020. And CCWD is a member of the Eastside GSA, which we've talked quite a bit about this last year. And that's made up of CCWD, Rock Creek Water District, Stanislaus County, and at some point, Calaveras County will join the MOU. So, the Eastside GSA joined the Eastern San Joaquin Groundwater Authority. That Groundwater Authority, the JPA, its main objective is to finish this groundwater sustainability plan by that deadline. So kind of just want to provide you an update on where the progress is with getting that groundwater sustainability plan off the ground. In 2017, DWR released up to $1.5 million per basin for groundwater sustainability plan development. Since there's only one application, we did ourselves a favor by forming a JPA that's made up of all the member agencies within that basin. That kind of helps make a stronger case for that full amount of the $1.5 million. It also requires a 50% local cost match, which can be further reduced down to 25% with a disadvantaged community waiver. And that JPA sent in a grant application in, I guess, November of 2017. It was the deadline. And it's a total $2,176,420 dollar project for that's the grant proposal, and they're trying to get the full $1.5 million available. So the proposed local cost match ends up being $676,000 and some change, and that award was supposed to be happening in late December, early January. We haven't heard anything from DWR. But the hope is that actually we might hear it earlier, like February, at the latest, actually. So, at the November 8th JPA meeting, the San Joaquin County Public Works staff brought forth a proposal for a cost share amongst all the 17 groundwater sustainability agencies, and it would allocate the local cost share for the project, that remainder of that local cost share, and split it up according to a formula. And the JPA at that meeting requested concurrence from all the different GSAs on that cost share, and wanted to get that information back to the board before their meet in February, because they're looking to sign the contract with DWR and potentially with the consultant as well. So here's sort of I think within your packet you have the cost share formula within that packet. As you'll notice, the Eastside GSA is responsible for $39,789, and that's more than the others in the basin, and I'll explain that a little bit. So there's something called the Zone 2 fund in San Joaquin County, where there's funds collected on parcels, mostly for the purpose of investigations and other things like that within the groundwater basin. And that's collected by what was the Flood Control District and now the Groundwater Basin Authority. They essentially were able to take some of that money from that Zone 2 contribution and offset those member agencies whose areas essentially cover those parcels. So the remainder has to be split amongst all the agencies. And since Calaveras and Stanislaus counties don't pay into that fund. Therefore, the cost share was just a little bit higher for those agencies. Here's kind of an example of what the Zone 2 boundary is. As you can see, it kind of extends down into, I guess, areas of Tracy and also throughout the entirety of San Joaquin County. And then you can see, here's our part of the basin, which kind of matches up pretty well with not being a part of that Zone 2. So, as I mentioned, the $39,789 was proposed to be paid for by the Eastside GSA. In the past, the fees for our GSA have been split evenly between the Stanislaus and Calaveras entities. So, 50% would go to the Calaveras County entities and 50% would go to the Stanislaus County entities, and sort of proposed that allocation going forward a while back. So CCWD would contribute a maximum of $19,895 for that cost share based upon the 50%. That's proposed to be paid in 2 installments in fiscal years 18-19 and 19-20. And it could also be further reduced should the county come in at some point and be willing to offset some of that cost share as well. So, I should mention too that it's much lower than what I had kind of projected out well, Jeff actually at one time had asked me kind of to throw some bookends on it. I had thrown something in the area of about $80,000. So I think we're getting quite a good deal here overall as far as that. And this all assumes that the DWR is willing to accept this cost share proposal.
So are we in the zone or the east side? Because with the proposed, that one table that's here with everybody 11,666,
Right.
I don't see us listed here.
Yeah, so
We're on the
We're
east
Okay,
side.
so we're the east side, which, okay, that comes into 39.
yeah,
And how many total east side participants are there?
there's 4.
4.
Yeah, and we've kind of, in the past, split them evenly. Well, actually, I take that back. I shouldn't say 4. Calaveras County has not formally joined the MOU. We're currently waiting for Stanislaus County and Rock Creek Water District to take action to allow them to come in.
So we're waiting for 3 other entities to step forward.
They are formally part of the GSA at this point.
But they're not committing anything financial?
Yes, so
Yeah,
Stanislaus
that's what I meant
County.
financially.
Stanislaus County has essentially agreed to pick up the costs for Rock Creek Water District.
So it's 50,
It's
50 between our county and Stanislaus, so the entities from our county, which of course right now would be us paying that. So the net effect would be about 20,000 for us over the course of 2 years, which again, that's 80,000 is you budgeted. I think that was actually a conservative estimate or underestimated the cost. The reason we're able to get this kind of a plan of this magnitude done for this amount of money, relatively smaller amount of money, is the fact that we've joined with the other entities, Stanislaus County and the others with our GSA, and then that entity have joined with the 16 other GSAs to do this. Is a very broad partnership, and that's what we'd always hoped, is if we could do this in partnership with others, we could really bring the cost down, and this definitely proves that that's the case. So it's an important investment of your time, Director Thomas being a part of this effort, us being there. I mean, this is allowing us to gain some real advantages, even right now, just in this early stage.
So if I understood you right, the reason that Calaveras County is not a member yet is Rock Creek and San Joaquin still have to take action at their board levels?
Yes, so
Okay.
Calaveras County.
And
we're still-
Calaveras County has already taken
Yes.
action at their level?
Yeah.
Okay, now, is there?
And we did too.
What's that?
We did too.
We
as
did
well.
too, right,
Yeah.
I knew that we did. Is there a question on their participation in this cost?
Stanislaus County? No.
No, not Stanislaus County. Is there a question that Calaveras County is going to be taking a portion of half of this, hopefully? Is that, have there been discussions, and is there a question of that still?
Well, that's my question. Is Calaveras County going to step forward with their financial commitment of half,
I have a wager I'd like to make.
Well,
as they're currently voting
yeah,
on a
and-
significant budget.
In Director Strange, the way we look at
Impact.
this, obviously, that, you know, this, our desire all along has been for our county to be a part of this effort as much as possible, because that really does make it a much stronger effort when you have your land use planning authority standing there with us. And the fact that really what we're doing here is the very early stages of what's going to be an effort that is going to be in perpetuity. And some of the heaviest lifting of this effort, and some of it regulatorily and financially, are actually going to be in the later stages as this becomes a regulating authority. I mean, this is because we're compelled to. Either we do it locally or the state will step in and force us to. So our thought is, you know, we will keep track of this expense, keep track of the fact that, you know, that for the time being, we will be covering the cost for our county. But the expectation is that in time, the other costs that will be coming along, that the county, if in fact it's unable to share in this cost, there will be plenty of other costs that the county can contribute to. And I think, you know, we'd like to see that in time that we share it equitably between agencies.
And I would really like to put this in writing. I would like to make sure that the county understands this. I don't, you know, I mean, it's one thing to participate on paper, it's another to really step forward to receive full benefit. And just as you say, we may have an expectation that we can get caught up down the road. Their expectations may be very different than that. And that might lead to considerable disagreement, misunderstanding, and you know, negative relationships if that happens, and whether they want to point at a water district as being a water monopolizer, you know, that, I mean, I've heard this all before. And so in my mind and in my footsteps, it's always want to document this very well as far as understanding or expectations.
How was it worded in our action and in the action that Calaveras County has taken at their board level?
So,
Did it address this?
When Calaveras County took the MOU to their board, Brian Moss did ask me for the budget, kind of the bookends that I gave him. So it is on their mind that they know that they would be having a financial contribution for this. It's just that they're not a formal member yet. So it's probably hard to come and ask them for money at this point. So.
I think it's worthy of mentioning that Supervisor Mills has been attending all these meetings, and we talk among ourselves, and I haven't gotten the impression that there's any reluctance on the part of the county to participate in this financially as well as collective or in lockstep. So.
Okay, good.
Okay, we do have a public comment on this item before we move further.
Thank you, President Ratterman. Yes, there is an item in their final budget for this very thing. So they are expecting to pay out whenever it gets finalized.
Okay, good. Well, thank you.
Good, thank you.
I have a question. It said something about a disadvantaged community cost share waiver?
Yeah, so the JPA did apply for the waiver to get down to the 25% cost share. So actually, the amount that is the cost share is a little more than 25%, but that's only because that's what they required of. They could have gone for a full $3 million project, but that was what the grant proposal called for. So it's 646, I believe, and some change thousand. It's just a little more than 25%. But the the number to focus on is a 1.5 million, which is the maximum that's available per basin. So the grant still is a $1.5 million grant that they're pursuing. And yeah, so it's just worth mentioning too. Today I'm on the consultant selection committee for this GSP, and so I was down in Stockton today, and there's been 2 proposals put together by pretty good teams, and you know, I think that from what I saw in the proposals, that the consultants are very aware of the fact that there are a lot of agencies within this basin that have limited resources and funds, and within that, their proposals, they did kind of propose ways to cut costs even within that right now. So that may not be the final figure.
And these are these proposals to make the application to DWR or to actually
For the
perform?
groundwater sustainability plan.
To perform the plan if the grant is awarded? Okay.
Yeah, and so the next meeting we have, I'm going to be gone all day, and we'll be doing interviews for the consultants for that work, and the hope is that it would be awarded in February, and you know, granted that all the 17 agencies also agreed to that cost share. So,
That meeting is scheduled for the 14th of February?
correct.
Valentine's Day. Yeah. Okay, well, I'll kiss and make up. If there's no further discussion, I'd like to make a motion. Is there a drum roll?
We get a motion?
Okay. I'd like to move that we adopt the resolution number 2018-03, approving the proposed cost share for the Eastern San Joaquin Groundwater Authority, JPA, for the development of the groundwater sustainability plan.
I'll second.
Got a motion and a second. Any further discussion here? Any public comment? What do we take roll?
Director Underhill?
Yes.
Director Thomas?
Yes.
Director Davidson?
Yes.
Director Strange?
Yes.
And Director Brennan?
Yes. Thank you, Peter.
Thanks, Peter.
Okay, moving on, old business, nothing to report. General Manager's report. Dave, do you have any?
Just really quickly, Mr. President, just a note on our board meeting agenda for the next meeting, and this will be for all future board meetings at the second meeting of the month. We will have a standing item under old business just to be able to, and it's going to be entitled Update on the Groundwater Sustainability Effort, something in that regard. And what it is at the request of Director Thomas, just to make sure we have a placeholder if we need a discussion about what's happening with within the last 30 days or so within the effort that we talked about today. So that'll be coming. I just want to give you a heads up that will be under old business. Next, I want to note that we do have a workshop coming up on February 6th. I know you've gotten some information about this, but this is a jointly hosted workshop with Amador Water Agency at their office, and it's to have Brent Ives, who has a consulting firm, and he's obviously worked with our agency before, and it's to provide a training on good governance practices for agencies like ours, and so that will be happening. And I believe that our board clerk will be working with the board to let you know more details as we get it, but we don't have the time yet, but it's February 6th. And lastly, I just want to note that I had a really good meeting with the National Water Resources Association last week. I went to the leadership conference in Las Vegas, and that organization is one that I now sit on the board because I'm part of because I chair the Aqua Federal Affairs Committee, and it's an organization of all of the western states that are reclamation states that have the reclamation facilities in their state. And we were really developing our legislative priorities and regulatory priorities for this year in D.C., and I was really impressed. And it was really heartening to hear all the way to Kansas and North Dakota and Texas to hear local water agencies there, the people that were there, board members and staff, talking about the same priority issues that we have, about the need for help with the infrastructure bill. That was one of the main things we talked about, was what's going to happen with that, and how do we best position ourselves for that. And it's really twofold. We're really going to try to push for the access to lower interest financing to get our projects done. I think that's probably our best track for success in the infrastructure bill. And then also to continue to seek regulatory reform to streamline the process of obtaining permits and the costs associated with that. And that's going to be kind of the focus of our efforts in that regard. And so in any event, and one of the other prime issues that we talked about was forest management, and that's something that a number of the states represented, like Colorado and Washington and Oregon, we share a very strong interest in seeing real progress made in the area of fuels management. And so we're engaged on that. That's one of the priorities of that association. And lastly, with regard to forest management, there's actually efforts underway, and Congress is part of the the desire to get an omnibus appropriations bill, or even possibly in one of the continuing resolutions for the spending for Congress, to include language in there to address both the fire borrowing problem that the Forest Service has, the fact that more and more money that is being spent on fire suppression is coming out of the funds that they would otherwise use to do fuels management, pretreatment, to reduce fuel loading. That, and then also things that can be done to increase the pace and scale of forest management, and see the projects that we have, like projects we have in our effort with Upper Mokelumne River Watershed Authority, can get done faster and less expensively. So there's a real chance that that's going to actually happen in the next few weeks, and we can see some real positive things in DC. And that's all I have.
Peter, do you have something to add to the general manager's report?
Yeah, sorry, Peter. Yes, he had one other point about our.
Yeah, I tried to
mitigation
sneak
planning.
that onto the
Thank
GM
you.
report. We're going to kick off the local hazard mitigation plan meeting next week on the 18th. So we'll be convening the committee for the kickoff of that effort. It's a 5-year update to our local hazard mitigation plan. Helps us remain eligible for FEMA and Cal OES grants for hazard mitigation, and also post-hazard and post-disaster funds as well. So the public will be invited, and also I think I've basically invited all the utilities in the county, as well as other county agencies, state and federal agencies as well. And it's from 10 to 2 on the 18th here in the boardroom.
10
So-
to 2 or
Or
10
sorry,
to 12?
10 to 12, thank you, yes.
And what is it called?
It is the Local Hazard Mitigation
Mitigation?
Planning Committee. So these are the folks that are going to help us to navigate the required update for that plan, so.
What will be the view of more than 2 directors being there?
Yeah, I think that's probably something you guys have to figure out amongst yourselves, I suppose.
Could come with a gag on.
Why don't we chat about that after the meeting, and we'll make sure that we.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Dave. Board reports, information, future agenda items. Start with Director Strange.
A couple of things. One, even though we have a January 24th board meeting, we do have an outreach event in West Point, Wilseyville on January 25th. It'd be our second time that we get to engage the locals there to discuss CCWD projects and some of the issues and concerns from the group there. So is there anything in particular on that agenda that you can think of, Dave?
I think one of the things that we definitely want to talk about is the efforts that we've done, our planning efforts, engineering and water resource management planning efforts that we've done in that area to try to better prepare for the future and what infrastructure we need to provide for the long-term water needs. And you know, we had the AB 142 report that we completed. Now we're doing the more of a master planning effort related to actual infrastructure and capital projects, and evaluating things like what do we do with the facilities that we have, where should we, you know, like on expanded storage, where the best areas to do that, and so that work's underway, and I think we want to share with them the things that we found through that, and what we are seeing in the way of capital projects.
Thank you. And again, that represents probably the county's most significantly disadvantaged areas. And that, real quickly, that meeting's at 11 o'clock at Maynard Management. But the second thing is my condolences to the Willie family. Hank Willie passed away recently, and Hank, boy, I'm trying to remember how far back I go on the McCullamy and his unique perspective on things. I will always forever remember. And so it's, very saddened to hear of his passing. And he will be missed in camera and the other McCullamy River activities. God bless his soul.
Who will represent CCWD since it's our board meeting? Do we have anyone going?
He has a
In the West
memorial
Point meeting?
on the
That-
24th, and Hank was from Jackson Valley Irrigation District and served with Cameron. But, I wasn't necessarily speaking to you. But, there's more people here.
Come on, it's all about Jeff.
look at it.
But he's having, his memorial is on the 24th at, and I don't know, are we, and that's a good question, Bertha, we will be having a meeting that same day at the exact same
Right,
time. His
right.
memorial's at 1 PM, and our meeting starts here at 1 PM.
Yeah.
Is there, and in light, is there something that the district will do, or send a representative, flowers,
I,
a
you know,
card?
I think that would be the least we could
Is that
do.
some-
We've known him
no.
forever.
We can certainly have people, I mean, it's a shame that we have the board meeting on top of that. I mean, I'd certainly
Yeah.
want to attend, and I know many of you would. Yeah, we, you know, obviously the gift of public funds issue precludes us from, you know, certain expenditures, but, yeah, no, let's follow up on that. I'll see,
Okay.
let me put some thought into that.
I'd be more than willing to donate, you know, whatever towards some sort of a gift, if somebody wants to take the lead on that.
No, I think I'd participate in that donation as well. Maybe we can come up with the board, maybe the board can pony up for individual employees that are interested.
But that's all I have. Thank you.
Jeff?
No, I echo sentiments about Hank. He was always great to listen to, a wealth of knowledge, and just generally a terrific guy. And he dedicated his, you know, certainly his later years in life. I don't know when he started, but I met him 20 years ago
Yeah.
up in McCombie Watershed, and he didn't seem any different the last time I saw him. You know, still talking about the same things, and they were all, everything was correct.
Yeah.
That's all I have.
Bertha?
Oh, yes, and Dave, you were going to mention our meeting that we had at Forest Meadows.
Oh, that's right, yes, and
Yeah,
would you,
remember
would you like
Forest
to, would you like to speak to that, Director Underhill, would you like to speak to the meeting, or I can as?
Yeah, go
if you'd like?
ahead.
Okay, so we did, as you said, we met and, with Jesse Hampton and Robbie Kramer as well, and Director Underhill, we met with the Forest Meadows HOA General Manager and Board President, and discuss the closing of the golf course and where we go from here. And, you know, I obviously this was something that, you know, we were, you know, dreading that this might happen. It's something we talked about, I think, over a year ago when we had a committee presentation on this here. But at least I can say, you know, there's still certain unknowns, but I can say that we have excellent communication and cooperation and coordination with the HOA. And that will continue, just really find people there, and we absolutely want to make sure that, you know, that things continue to you know, we can use that area for disposal. We have to. It's a public health issue, and we certainly don't want to see it turn into anything that would be a nuisance to the community and create other problems. And so coming out of that, Jesse's following up with the owners, Sierra Golf Management, to get more information on what their plans are for how they intend to maintain the property and continue to use the spray, irrigation equipment to spray the treated effluent, how that will continue post golf course. And obviously we have to make sure that that happens. It's you know, it's a must have.
Well, it's not locked up, like I was down in Valley Springs and saw the lockup at La Contenta. Yeah, it looks,
Well, we're back on the general manager's report. We'll get back to Bertha's report, and we're talking about closures of golf course, and where do we go from here? Do you have anything to say about La Quintana?
We have it on a closed session agenda.
Oh, okay.
back to
Okay,
Bertha?
Back to Bertha.
Well, maybe I can just say from a public setting, obviously, you know, the closure of La Quintana as well, the same issues at play, and obviously, we have to make sure that we protect our interest. It's the community's, it's you know, it's our you know, effluent disposal area. It's integral to the system, and it's a public health problem that we can't allow to happen, and the state certainly stands right there with us. That's one of the nice things, at least with the regulatory community on these kind of issues. We stand in lockstep because no one wants to see this turn into a problem. So we will absolutely, these are something we're talking about all the time now.
Thank you.
Back to Bertha? I just received an invitation to the grand reopening of the Moose Lodge up in Evans's Pass, so I
Wow.
think that's great. They're going to have a dinner on January the 27th, so I'd be happy to attend this on behalf of CCWD. And we're still waiting for our pickleball decision, okay? We wanted to do something at White Pines Park, put up a pickleball area. And I was happy to read that, I was reading Mia's monthly status, and she said that she had a positive conversation, and Mr. Lutz asked Mia to provide a proposal for lobbying for a joint advocacy approach. And we've been talking about that for many years, and so I'm glad to see that that's gotten off the ground. That's it.
Director Thomas. Your time's running out.
My time's running out. Is anybody interested in hearing an explanation about why we had the public records request recently?
Can we speak about that?
Yes.
Well, I mean, it's not agendized for discussion, but, you know, I mean, this is just,
Well, we were all kind of put through our paces for it. It was
I already know. I don't need to know.
okay, all right.
I would like to know the financial impact that it's had to us.
If you got
If I
something to
decide to
report,
take
you'd like
that
to
down the
report,
road.
report away.
Nah, on second thought, I'll just reserve my comments. I just wanted to tell you that I will be going to the McCollum River Association meeting on Friday the 12th at the Jackson Valley facility. Looking forward to that. And that's all I have to report, except I guess our next meeting will be on the 24th. Oh, on the 22nd, I'm looking forward to the meeting with the schedule is 22nd with the president, vice president, chairman, vice chairman of the county. Is that on your schedule?
It's on our agenda, it's on our calendar, but I don't know if it's been confirmed yet.
And we do have a finance committee meeting?
Not scheduled for this month, I'm going to be off next week.
Oh, okay.
yeah, we will confirm on that coordination meeting with the president, vice president, chair, and vice chair. We had to find out who the leadership officials would be at the county to be able to do that.
Okay. Anybody else going to the McComb River Association on Friday? I'm not. I can't make it.
I can't make it.
Okay.
But I just wanted to ask you a question. You are our new president. I'm assuming that you'll pick up your pace on your Twitter account.
No, I don't plan on having a Twitter account.
That's what presidents do.
I don't plan on
Yeah.
tweeting this year, at least.
How do we impeach?
Good idea.
No.
Are you anything
No,
anything
I'm
further? Okay.
Clearly not.
All right, the Mountain County Water Resources Association is having its meeting at the TUD on January 19th. It'll be at 10:30 in Tuolumne County at the TUD office. And I'll be out of town on business, work-related business on February 14th for our regular scheduled meeting. I won't be in attendance. That's for February 14th. So Wednesday, the second meeting from today. And I did have one other. Item. Yep. Have to skip on the next item. All right, next board meetings. It'll be Wednesday, January 24th, here, 1 p.m. in this room, and then Wednesday, February 14th here. We're going to go into closed session to discuss conference with legal counsel, existing litigation, La Quintana Investors LTD versus CCWD. And then item 9B is conference with legal counsel, threatened litigation, one additional case. Before we head out, any public comment on either one of those items? Seeing none, we're headed to closed session. Thank you.